the cool thing with these drones is they're really fast. They fly about 250 miles an hour, and they pull 47 to 48 Gs in the corners. So we launched this thing, and for a brief moment, this thing that was just a thought was now a physical reality, and we built it from scratch. It's flying, and not only is it flying, I'm flying it. And I'm like, this is the greatest feeling. And I remember I felt like I was a god. I didn't know what I was doing. The plane caught a really hard thermal or draft, and it just started a spiral and then just hit the ground and blew up in 16 million pieces. I sit on the board at NASA, and with the UTAM, which is unmanned traffic management, which is pretty neat as we're trying to figure out and integrate all of these drones that are going to be flying around. I made the US team and the world team, and set a few world records.
Welcome back to the Amazing Marketing Show. I am your host, Dmitry Smirov, here with my co-host, Chris Gray. Chris, what's going on?
Dmitry, what up?
Living the dream, Chris. And so excited about the episode we had last week with our man, Nuno, who gave us the absolute best advice when it comes to not just AI, automation, marketing, but mindset. So definitely check that episode out. But today we have another incredible guest. We have the drone boss. Damon, we'd like you to tell us, how would you describe who you are and what you do?
Wow. Well, the nickname, the drone boss, I've been flying drones for almost 50 years now. And I've been running a commercial drone business for the last 30 years. And with AI in the sky, that's really transformed things. So it's been pretty cool. I've had the unique opportunity of setting a couple world records. I sit on the board at NASA, and with the UTAM, which is unmanned traffic management, which is pretty neat as we're trying to figure out and integrate all of these drones that are going to be flying around, and not just for deliveries and emergency and mapping and photographs and all that, but also transportation. Over in China, just day before yesterday, they just passed where now it's official, where drone taxis have been approved by their version of the FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration. And so now they're going to have autonomous drones flying people around like Ubers. So it's going to be pretty cool that we'll start seeing that, here in the future, and stuff to look forward to. So the main thing that I've been doing really the last decade is helping people take advantage of this new emerging technology and actually not only, have fun with it, but actually build businesses and make money with it. So it's been pretty cool, pretty exciting.
I love what we do. Damon, I see you at the mastermind, and we talk, and real chill dude, nice shirts, and then here he is sitting on the board of NASA. I would have never, I never knew it. It's just we find out so much about this show. But speaking of, my question for you, Damon, is what is something most people get wrong about starting a drone business?
I think the biggest thing is they put too much emphasis on the flying the drones. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I see. And I get why, because for decades, drones have been around for over 100 and 30 years now. The first patent on a drone in the United States was by Nikola Tesla back in the 1890s. So they've been around a long time, but for a long time they were very difficult to fly. And I think, to your point, what most people get wrong is they spend all their time trying to become the absolute best pilot in the world. And the reality is now AI has really taken over. Thanks to these things, we have accelerometers and gyros and super fast computing that can do things that a human can't do. Just kind of like the modern day fighter jets. If it wasn't for all the avionics and the computers, no human could fly them. So the result is the drones are easier to fly and harder to crash than ever before. And so focusing on actually the benefits of what they can do for their clients is probably where people miss the mark. And I think that goes along with most businesses. they don't put themselves in their client's shoes and really think about what's important to them and what would be the solution to them. One thing we talk about is like the way you present yourself to the marketplace, like an elevator pitch. And one of the things we talk about is like, hey, if you're in the proverbial elevator, right? And you a client, someone comes in the elevator with you and they read your shirt and it's like, oh, cool guy, drone services. What's that? And most guys say, oh, well, I fly drones and I take pictures from the sky and I take videos. And this this prospect who could be just the ideal client is like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I got my nephew a drone for Christmas. Yeah, that's cool, right? So the value proposition just dropped. And what we teach people is how to what problem are you really solving. So rewind that tape and you get the same thing. And the guy says, oh, cool guy aerial drones. What is that? Say, oh, well, we help companies make more money, get more clients, introduce efficiencies, and impress everyone they know by using aerial imagery and data collection.
Well, yeah, it definitely matters how you frame it. And so, but okay, Damon, you run the Sky Eye network, and you guys there are. And speaking of Sky Eye, there's a helicopter that just went by.
Yeah, that's my buddy David. He always comes and buzzes right by. He's going back to the house there.
I mean, it's a helicopter. That's kind of like a drone, right?
Kind of, yeah. It's aircraft in national airspace.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you guys run the Sky Eye network, and it's a world leader in business development in drone, quadcopter, robocopter industries. And I want to get to that, but first, you kind of left us on a little bit of a cliffhanger with the 2 world records. Give us a little bit more about that.
So, well, I think like anything, the drones were passions of mine. I mean, from a little kid, that was everybody else had. They were, Star Wars came out. I was a kid of the 70s, right? So Star Wars came out, and everyone was collecting Star Wars stuff, and I didn't care about any of that stuff. I just wanted drones. I wanted to build drones, work on drones, fly drones. It was just my passion. And so I got into competing with drones, and they have drone racing. They still have them. And these things are in different countries. It's a really big deal because they don't have national sports teams or, football teams or anything like that. And so their drone pilots are kind of their elite athletes or their elite people. And it's funny, in some of the smaller countries, like the government literally gives them a house, a butler, a chef, and a trainer, and all they do is they just fly all day long, to compete. And every 4 years they have a world competition. It's kind of like the Olympics. And I competed in racing drones, and we would go and compete. I made the U.S. team and the world team, and set a few world records. And the cool thing with these drones is they're really fast. They fly about 250 miles an hour, and they pull 47 to 48 G's in the corners. So if you know anything about G forces, that's a lot of G forces. And and we're flying them all manual, so there's no computers or anything on there. So it takes a lot of skill and and a lot of time. But that's before I was able to make money with drones. I just did it out of love and passion, and I did it for decades, until I finally kind of cracked the code and then started making money with it.
Well, it's funny. We had an event where we were racing go-karts at a spot, and then we did the race and we get out, and wouldn't you know it, Damon's in first place by far. So clearly that applies to not just drones but all sorts of racing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think transferable skills, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people, entrepreneurs and just people in general, they take for granted. Is we've got all these amazing, incredible transferable skills that that stem from our passions and the things that we really care about, whether it's basket weaving or horticulture or scuba diving or whatever it is, or racing. It carries over, and we see that a lot with business. The cool thing in the drone industry is, like, you don't have to have really any drone experience or photography or videography or photogrammetry experience. and people are making, they're making more money flying little drones than seasoned pilots flying for United and American Airlines. It's pretty crazy. And a lot of that is just people skills, communicating, and using this new tech while it's in this infancy stage.
Damon, you're over here dropping some gems. You just talked about transferable skills, which you can go down the rabbit hole with. I want to go back to another gem you just dropped, and you were talking about what are you really selling, the elevator pitch thing. So saying that I take pictures in the sky with a drone is a lot different than I use drones to help people build a roofing empire or something. So for those who need to figure out what they're really selling when you're coaching people, how do you get your guys to know what they're really selling here with their business?
Well, the advantage that in our network, we pre-identified pretty much all of the hot buttons, right? These are the things that the client cares about in different vertical markets. And ultimately in business, it all stems down to basically the same thing. I mean, most people in business, they want to get more clients, they want to generate more money, they want to be more efficient. And as shallow as it seems, just human nature, we want to impress everybody, that we know, right? We want, it's just part of it it's bred into us, from the time we're little kids. We don't want to look bad. We don't want people not to like us. And so, that's part of it. And the funny thing, this really comes out, at least for us, with aerial imagery, because for most people, having a shot from the sky, an aerial image, the only time people see that is in cinematography, like movies, high-end movies. And so it's getting a little bit more mainstream, but most people, that's the only time they associate it. And we've worked with businesses and we've helped these businesses grow, $2, $3, $5, $10 million. And they're excited about it, but not as excited as like when we show an aerial image of their warehouse or of their company or of all their trucks. I remember this one of our members did for this. This was HVAC company, and they had grown from doing about $2.5 million of revenue to a little over $18 million of revenue using all of the marketing materials and everything that we've helped them with. And he was excited about it, like, oh, that's cool, that's good, and we're going to continue to go and everything. But then they did a promo video with the new warehouse and all the trucks lined up and all the guys out there and stuff. And he was like a little kid. He was like, "This is so cool! I got to send this. How do I put it on Facebook?" And I was like, "Dude, I've known you for 8 years. I've never seen you this excited about anything." And he was just so pumped and excited about it. And again, it's just a view from a perspective that they've never seen before. And I think that's one of the cool things that we get to be a part of and see and help people, to show their business or company and, in that light. And again, that goes back to that, he was so proud of it. It's like when you have anything you love, you get, your logo with the business, or even take it more personal, your children. Like you want to show everybody, pictures of your kids and, and how they're growing and any accomplishments they have. You want to share that, they got accepted to Wharton or to Harvard, or they started their own company or.
Yeah, and in this case, getting the Instagram reel with the aerial footage that reminds them of the high-end cinematography, that's what they really like. Okay, Damon, so there's the business side of the drone thing, but then there's the operator side. You were an operator, and probably many of your students are operators too. And based on what we could find about drones, so one thing that you need to have is the 107 FAA Part 107 certification. It seems like you've trained tens of thousands of people in doing that. So what's your advice to passing the Part 107 quickly without overstudying?
Well, I think that's the key. I see a lot of people that way overstudy, and the problem is it's almost like learning a foreign language that you don't practice. And so, because it's not something you use day to day, and the reality is most of the stuff on the test is stuff that most drone operators aren't going to use very frequently. So if you study for it, you forget it. It's short-term memory. So I think the key is having condensed study time. Now, I have a study course, and of course, I would recommend that. We have a video study course, and we offer some cool things. Number one, if you don't pass the test on your first time, we'll of course refund you all your money that you took for the test. But not only that, we'll also refund you for what you had to pay the FAA for the test.
Wow.
Because there's a test fee, and currently it's $175. And luckily, we've had a little over 30,000 people go through our program, and to date, we've had to refund 5 people. So we're pretty proud of that. It's a pretty low number of people using our material to actually pass it. And by the way, 3 of those guys, they never even logged into the portal or accessed any of the training material, but we still refunded them anyway, for that. But yeah, and it's one of those things. It's just a necessity. If you're gonna make money with the drone, you got to go through and do it. And I would recommend doing it sooner than later, because right now it's not easy, but it's the easiest that it's probably ever going to be. It's just going to get more complicated and harder to do as time goes by.
Damon, you've brought together, like you said, you had 30,000 people go through your course. You have this community of people that you help become drone entrepreneurs, and you have live events, right? Yeah. And so my question to you is, what is the secret to throwing a really good live event?
Well, I think the base foundation that I try and do with all my businesses is I always try and get 3 wows from the client. And we teach that to our operators, like for when you're delivering for our guys that are out doing photo shoots or whatever they're doing, or photogrammetry. When they deliver the pictures, that's usually the first wow. The client's like, wow, these look really great. And not huge, but it's still a wow. And then the second one, which is so easy to do in today's day and age, is just have some basic common courtesy, customer service, and just be friendly. So most of the time, our guys are doing B2B sales. Like they're working for a business or a developer, contractor, or a grower, farmer, or a realtor. And just by them, when they interact with the end client, like in the case of a realtor, if you're just nice to that, whoever the homeowner is selling their house, compliment the house, some pictures on the wall, small talk, some conversation, goes such a long way. And then we always get feedback from the realtor saying, I think that my client likes you more than they like me, which is great because you're edifying, your client ultimately, and it makes them want to work with you more and naturally be a part of their team. So we do that in pretty much all aspects of it. So for doing the live events, I think the main thing with the live event is we want to make it educational, but we also want it to make it entertaining. Because we're talking, our live events, they're 3 days and they're about 30 hours of content. And most people, if they know that up front, they're like, oh my God, how am I going to make it through 30 hours of it? And then at the end, they're like, I can't believe it's over. I don't want it to be over, and they're so engaged and enthralled with it. So I think one of the wows we give them is we try and keep things really moving. There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of interaction with them. And I think that's the main thing, is also physiology. We do a lot of different things to have them change their physiology. And it's just different from what they would get at pretty much any other seminar. And we always hear these crazy compliments. They're like, oh, we've been to every event and this is the best event ever. I mean, we've been to Grant Cardone and Tony Robbins and all. And I'm like, and I appreciate that. I'm like, that's so cool. It's not true in my opinion. I think it's just more recent and it's something that maybe they're interested in. But it's still good to hear that. And we hear that, literally after every event. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure they're interested in it. I'm interested in even from afar looking into this drone world, this drone business. It seems like you guys are perfectly positioned in a growing industry. You're putting on phenomenal events. Your customers are having success. They're making money. I mean, nicely done. But let's peel back the curtain a little bit and find out how things work behind the scenes. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what does it take to actually make this all happen? Like, behind the scenes, the team, we know that you work with your incredible wife, Gina Eubank, who we adore. and she's Mrs. Drone Boss,
Yeah.
and we'd love to hear the dynamics of that. But just walk us through your own mindset too of how to actually deliver at such a high level over such a long period of time.
Well, I think let's go back to starting with Gina, because I think that's kind of the foundation for it, is vision, right? Like we use the analogy with drones, like with an airplane. Airplanes, it's super important you know where you are, realistically where you are and where you're taking off from, and it's super important to have crystal clear vision or know your destination exactly to to the T of where it is, because what happens as soon as you take off, you get blown off course. In fact, every airplane, when it's in flight, it's off course 98% of the time. But it knows exactly where it's going to. So when it gets blown off course, it makes a little adjustment. It gets blown off course this way, makes another adjustment, another adjustment. You're just constantly making adjustments. And if you have enough clarity in your vision and what you want, then a lot of that stuff, it sounds kind of hokey pokey, but it actually organizes the energy, and subconsciously things will happen and guide you to that, even without you having to consciously think about it. Like working with my wife, my dream was to have a spouse that was my best friend. We could spend 24/7 together, work together, play together, and we'd have this just amazing connection that would be playful and joyful, and it would just be so fulfilling. And that's what we have. Now, when it first started, and I mentioned this to Gina originally about, I would love to work together. And she's like, well, that's never going to happen. Right? But, hanging on to that vision and stuff just happens, and it all goes through. So fast forwarding to, kind of behind the scenes and what we're doing, I think the whole thing is also the vision. We know the outcome, we know where we want to go. And the main focus that we guide everything by is, how would we want to be treated? What resources would we want? What support would we want if we were on the other side of the receiving end of these, of the services? So if we were a member of your network, what was everything that we would want? And that's kind of how we came up with everything. And then we look at, we're always constantly evolving and improving and adding things. And it was anything we can do to remove any resistance from our clients getting successful, we would do that. One thing people had trouble with was getting everything set up in the beginning, getting their website set up, getting all their social media set up, getting all their software set up and integrated, and, getting all that stuff done. So we do all that for them. So they don't have to do any of that stuff. They can just focus on going out and getting competent enough to get their first sale. And everything we do, we focus on them getting their first sale. Because once they get their first sale, then they're like, oh my gosh, this is real. Whether it's $300 or $3,000, it doesn't matter. It just getting that first one, then it gets easier and then easier and easier. And so everything we do supports that whole process. So they can go off and then, and then it's like a snowball going downhill. Like so we've got tons of people that have generated over $1 million with their drone business in just a few years. And it's pretty cool, because now these guys have built up these assets that are, worth $3 million, $5 million, $10 million that they can sell, or they can leverage, or they can leave as a legacy piece to their family, which is really cool. And now, as behind the scenes, when we first started, so this was about 9 years ago, we did our very first event, and we had our workbook was just a blank notepad. It was just a workbook that was branded on the front cover and just a bunch of blank notes in there. And that was, what we started with. But we knew the ultimate goal. And as we were working with people, we provided more stuff for them. One of the things that we do also that we developed, or we call them business plans, and are different from traditional business plans, because these are really kind of the everything you would need to be successful in a particular vertical market. So we have several of these for different industries, like real estate. And there's everything in there from identifying the marketplace to how you talk to the clients, and scripts for what you say, and how you get, how you deliver everything, and how you shoot everything, and how, all the marketing materials and the swipe files and the direct mail campaigns and presentations to do with all the notes and everything. And just anything and everything they would need for any one particular vertical market for them to to just go out and be successful in. So that's what we try and do. And we've just built up because we, like I mentioned in the beginning, it was just a blank book. And then we came out with the first business plan, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. And then, we keep adding resources and support and help for them. So it's helped us grow to where we are now.
Speaking of that progress, Damon, it seems like, you didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I like drones. And you break world records and you have a big drone business and you're on the board of NASA. That didn't happen overnight. There was a period there that, you went through the suck. Everybody does, right? It might be a moment, it might be a period or so. And so tell us about a time where you were a moment, a period where you went through the suck and you were like, hey, man, I'm not sure if I'm going to get out of this.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you two. One was when I first started. I was a little kid. I was 6 years old when I wanted to get my first drone, and my dad did everything he could to dissuade me and distract me from doing it. Because when I first discovered these things, I was running through a hobby store and I busted my face. I tripped on my shoelaces, split my lip open. I'm bleeding and I'm crying. And I look up and I see all these drones, helicopters, and airplanes hanging on the ceiling. And I was like, wow. And went up and talked to the guy about it. And he's telling me, they fly their remote control. And I was like, oh, you mean like by a wire or a string? Because my reference as a 6-year-old was a kite or something like that. And he said, no, with radio waves. And I just sat there. I was like, my little brain just blew up. I was like, radio waves? It's like, oh, I want one. And so my dad finally comes in, and then we start talking to the guy and find out how expensive these things are. This was back then, it's going to cost about $2,000 to $2,500 for one of these things. Now, back then, you could buy a brand new Corvette off the showroom floor for $7,500. So for $2,500 for this toy, it was just, my dad's like, this is never happening. Mm-hmm. So like I said, he did everything to distract me, and, he made me save up the money to buy it. And we built it. It took 13 months to build the first one. And every night we'd work on it. And he was just trying to discourage me at every single point. And anyway, finally, 13 months later, finally get it up in the air. And anyway, long story short, it was the most exhilarating and devastating 15 seconds of my life, because we launched this thing, and for a brief moment, this thing that was just a thought was now a physical reality. And we built it from scratch, like literally cutting all the little ribs for the wings and building this out and covering it and all the electronics, and it's flying. And not only is it flying, I'm flying it. And I'm like, this is the greatest feeling. And I remember I felt like I was a god. It was the coolest thing ever until it wasn't. And then, of course, I didn't know what I was doing. The plane caught a really hard thermal or draft, and it just started a spiral and then just hit the ground and blew up in 16 million pieces. And I just, lost it. I'm, 6, just about to be 7. And I am just crying like a little girl, man. I am just, and my dad's like, I told you, son, this is a big boys, sport. And we cleaned up all the debris and got it all scooped in the back of the truck. And I remember driving off, and I'm wiping my tears. And, I know my dad feels terrible, but he can't really say anything. And he's like, we gave it a good shot, old buddy. He used to call me old buddy. And I remember looking up at him, and I was like, hey, Dad, we built that. Do you think we could rebuild it? Mm-hmm. And he just looked down at me, and I remember it was the only time I've ever seen him cry, and he had a little tear came down his eye. He's like, you bet, old buddy, we'll build it. We'll rebuild that thing. And we spent the next 6 months doing it. And I think it was in that moment, because I didn't have there was no reason to rebuild it. And even after we rebuilt it, the next time, my 15 seconds just got 30 seconds of glee and joy until destruction set in. But each time, and I love that you said, like, embrace the suck, because each time I sucked less. The next time I sucked a little less, the next time I sucked a little less, and then I got a little better and a little better and a little better. And then all of a sudden that turned into good. And then I got really, really good. And then I got great. And then, years later, the world records came and stuff. But I think the key is the consistency, and just sticking with it, even when there's no real evidence in your world or your peripheral that things are different. It's just kind of a knowing. And the same thing, that the second example I'll share with you is when I started the network, because I had started my first drone business. I actually started making money in drones in 1993. And over the years, I had people every once in a while, it's like, man, I want to do what you do. And I would work with them. And like I mentioned earlier, it was a self-regulating industry, meaning it took 5,000 to 7,000 hours of practice before you could get good enough to fly even at the entry levels of a commercial level. And most people wouldn't put that kind of dedication or time to it. And so I'd help people try and get started, and they just didn't seem to really have the success. So I was a little concerned with it. But when I decided to launch the network, because the technology, we had these electronic gyros and accelerometers and this technology that came up, it's like, holy cow, maybe now's the time I can do it. But I still was scared, and I was remembering those crashes. Mm-hmm. And so rather than launching, which I should have done, and in hindsight, I wish I had done, I assembled a beta program, and I got guys that had, I had some criteria. They couldn't have any drone experience, no photography experience, and no successful entrepreneurial experience, which the way I defined that was they could have never made more than $42,500 running their own business in net revenue. Because I had guys I had some friends that had, they did $1 million a year, but after paying their employees and expenses and insurance and taxes, they're netting out 35, 40 grand. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I came up with. And then the idea was to get them from 0 to 6 figures in 12 months or less, with giving them just absolute minimal resources, making them use kind of the cheapest crap on the planet to be able to do this and see if they could do it. And at first, it didn't look like they were going to do it, because it's like compound interest. When you first start, you suck a lot. And then it takes a long time when you suck to have the courage to go back out and do it again and suck not as bad. And then, and then eventually you start to space those gaps a little closer together. And then you start to get better quickly. So the first 6 months, I'm thinking, man, none of these are going to do it. They're not tracking. Their KPIs were off. But one of the requirements I had is they had to do something every day, even if it was only for 30 minutes. But having that consistency started paying off, and just having faith that it would. And I was scared, and I doubted it, and I questioned myself a lot during all that. But I committed to doing it for the year, and then of course everybody from like month 9 to 12, everybody, it was like compound interest. Whoosh, they just shot up, and then everybody hit the number and hit the mark. And I was like, all right, we can do this. And then we just, we had all this excitement, motivation, and we rolled it out from there.
Wow. Well, first of all, what a beautiful memory that you had with your father there, going back to age 6, and the inspiration for your passion in drones and this this venture with Sky Eye Network now that's helping so many people and growing. And by the way, we're going to include the links here. So if you want to check those out, check the description, click the link, check out an event. The events really are incredible. So do look into that. Damon, so that was a little bit of a blast to the past, and let's blast to the future here for a second. You did talk about China and drone taxis, but give us your vision of the future of drones.
Well, I mean, it's going to far exceed even what we can probably comprehend right now. But I mean, there's so much stuff right now. There's over 300 different vertical markets, and these things range from doing, agriculture, doing golf courses, aerial funerals where we're spreading ashes in amazing places, and inspections. And that doesn't even count delivery or the people moving and all the autonomous stuff and medical supply delivery and, transplants and organ delivery and firefighting and window cleaning, all that stuff. There's going to be lots more, but things will radically change over the next decade as far as what we're going to see. And it's just going to make things better for all of us. We have the inspection side blows my mind because we have the technology now, but it's just adopting new technology. All these industries are pretty slow. And if you look at cell towers or wind farms or power line inspections or bridges or dams or any of that stuff, last year there were over 300 fatalities in these inspection industries. 82% of those fatalities, these guys were just doing a routine inspection, a visual inspection that a drone could easily do right now. And that doesn't even count the injuries, amputations, paralyzations, all the other stuff where people lived, but are, their lives are forever changed for it. And so the drones can do that now and literally save lives. And so in the next few years, we're going to see a big adoption of that and a big transition of that. And, and delivery, we finally have started getting approval. We've been working on it for the last several years with NASA and working with the FAA to get these delivery drones approved. And we've got Zipline and Amazon is starting to deliver in some beta areas. And, one of the biggest challenges we had at NASA was, number one, safety in the airspace, but then also visual and noise pollution. Because you start getting, you heard just one helicopter fly by, how noisy that is, right? And you start getting hundreds or thousands of drones buzzing around at low altitude, because they call it the low altitude economy. Basically, most aircraft, they fly 500 feet and above. In fact, legally, they're not allowed to fly below 400 or below 500 feet unless they're taking off or landing. So they have to stay above that. Drones, we're not allowed to fly above 400 feet. So we have this nice little 100-foot safety buffer that keeps us there. But this low altitude economy is going to encompass all the deliveries and all the drones and all the stuff that's going on, the surveying, the security, everything that's going on with the drones, from power washing buildings to putting out fires to, anything and everything in between. And so figuring out how to do that, the delivery systems, which are pretty cool. Most of these things, they have the drone that flies up about 400 feet, and then it has a little tethered on a cable, a little micro drone that has the package. And the cable detracts and it drops down about 400 feet. And this little bitty drone that holds the package has little powered motors, so it can move forward, back, left, and right. And it all uses GPS and LiDAR guidance. So they can literally deliver the package with dinner plate accuracy, literally within a few inches, and drop it in any one place. And it's virtually silent. You can't hear anything. So it eliminates a lot of that. So it's going to be pretty cool to see how that happens and just the integration we're going to have with everything. The result of it is it's going to bring our costs down for a lot of the goods that we have and we use. And then the conveniences of everything is just going to go up. I remember, gosh, I think it was 2016 when Jeff Bezos was talking about, and we're going to have drones delivering stuff with Amazon Prime soon. And people are like, oh, he's crazy. He's smoking shrooms, or, he's off his rocker. But the reality is we could have had it sooner, but on the regulatory side, that's where it kind of slowed down. So we're going to see all kinds of cool stuff. In fact, Uber has invested really heavily. Their whole division, Uber Air, they've been investing in that for the last 7 years. And they've been buying up a lot of the clover leafs, in the big cities, the highways, where you have the big circular exits, and you have that inaccessible land that's kind of in the middle of it. And Uber's been buying that. So those will be relay points and charging stations, and for people as they're commuting and doing all their Uber Air transports and stuff. So it's neat to see how a lot of it's forming up, and that doesn't even get into all of the humanoid, drones and robots and stuff that we're gonna start seeing. Tesla's building some cool stuff, and Boston Robotics and Honda, and there are several companies that are doing some really cool stuff with it.
You know, as you say that, I'm thinking about, well, how can I get away from all this and still get my overnight deliveries? And it sounds like I'm in luck because I can move way out to wherever I'm and still have overnight delivery from Amazon. So it's a win-win.
Yep. Yeah.
Damon, so we're talking about, a little bit about the past. We're in the future. Let's go back to the present right now. Say there's an individual out there and they are into drones. They're YouTubing it. They're learning how to fly it. They're all into it. And they know that what they do right now is not a job that they want to keep for the future. They want to start their own drone business. What advice do you give to that individual who wants to start their business today?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the best thing, I have a little couple hour free workshop. And I'll get you guys a link to that where people can go in and they can kind of dip their toe in just to see if this is even something that they want to do or they want to take advantage of. And then from there, we have our 3-day training and we make it ridiculously inexpensive for people to do it. But I'd really recommend investing the time to do that, because people that attend that, you're going to learn more in that 3 days than most people know after 2 or 3 years of trying to get out there in the real world. And the stuff we cover is where do you put your focus? Where do you not put your focus? What do you do? What do you scale? How do you grow? What do you focus on now? Like, what's the best ROI, not only money wise, but also for your energy and your time, on what you're gonna invest in. Because the cool thing is I think we're in this neat area with AI and with drones, and I really feel like the drones are really kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I remember I was talking to one of my mentors, and I was like, I know that's happening, but I don't feel like it. And he said, look, the only reason you don't feel like it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, like you feel any different, is because you've never been in a once in a lifetime opportunity before. And it just feels like everything else. You're just aware of the opportunity that's there. And when I look at what's going on, like right now, nothing's been standardized in the drone industry, and everything is just wide open. And right now, last year at the end of 2024, we topped out around $30 billion in commercial drone activities. In the next, by 2030, Precedence Research did this comprehensive study, and they're expecting the drone industry on the commercial side, not military or any of that stuff, just where we're operating, to be a $500 billion industry. So the growth is unbelievable, and it's huge, but you got to take advantage of it. And I think that's the main thing, is that people they spend, like we talked about before, they spend their time on the wrong things, and then all of a sudden months go by or years go by, and then all of a sudden they missed it. And it's, they're at a party or something telling everyone, I was going to do that. They took my idea.
They took my idea. Yeah, everyone's had one of those. A lot of people are afraid that with AI and robotics, there's not going to be any space for humans to do their thing. And I mean, is that not going to be the case in drones?
No, I don't think so. And it's going to change. And you're right. Like the piloting side, right now, the piloting side is still pretty important, but that's going to slowly fade out over the next couple of years. And then what it's going to be, just supplying full service solutions and figuring out exactly what those solutions are. Like for example, for agriculture, the technology is almost there now, but in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to see, that drone companies are going to be supplying to these farms all the equipment, the software, the hardware. They're going to be maintaining them, and then and upgrading them as new technology comes out. But what'll happen at the farms is these drones, they'll just pop out of the ground, like a sprinkler system almost, and then they'll fly their autonomous mission, and they'll do the whole thing. They'll map everything, come back, land on their little dock, go back underground, self-charge, automatically upload all the data they got. The data will then be processed and simulated through computer programs, and the AI will analyze it, determine, what needs water, what needs seed, what needs fertilizer, what needs pesticide, what needs this. Then it disseminates that information out to each of the particular drones. And then these drones will go out and seed. They'll go out to the GPS guided tractors. The tractors will go do all their stuff. And then it just kind of keeps running. But just like sprinkler systems, if you have a sprinkler system in your house, you don't just put the sprinkler system in and it works flawlessly forever.
Mm-hmm.
There are leaks, stuff breaks, stuff freezes. There's upgraded system. We get new software where you can start running your sprinklers, remotely on your phone and setting timers and doing all this other stuff. And so, I think that's where it's going to go, in the future. And now maybe way, way in the future, 50 years, 100 years from now, things will be way different. But I think just like with computers, I remember, and I went to the Texas State Fair, and I think this was in 1978. And General Electric had this big booth there, and they were focusing on the new technologies and computers and the modernization, robotics and stuff. And they were saying that, and it had all this cool stuff, and it was like the Jetsons to me. It was like, I was like, this is going to be so cool. And they said by the year 2000, right? And this was what, 22 years ahead. But they said, based on the technology and the growth of technology, the average person back then worked, I think, 42 hours, if I remember what their little thing said. And they said, because of robotics and computers and technology, by the year 2000, that the robots and all the automation, we're going to have automatic, washers and dryers and dishwashers and all this stuff that's going to happen automatically, that the average person is going to work 12 hours a week instead of 42, because the technology will make things so much better for us. And we all know that it's exactly the opposite. Computers ushered in a whole new era of industries and jobs and all kinds of things that we never even fathomed or couldn't even think about back then. I mean, in the 70s, they didn't know what, LMS was or Lotus or Python or any of that stuff, right? I mean, it was just, it hadn't even been thought of as an option yet, or even these things, right? And now we can't even imagine not walking around with one of these supercomputers in our pocket. It's pretty cool. So I think the stuff that we don't know is just going to be even more exciting and available to us. So I think there'll be a whole bunch of new things that stem from it.
Yeah, I like that. The optimistic view. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I know we're approaching time. One really quick question, Damon. I'm obviously, I know nothing about this drone world, and so all this stuff to me is fascinating. But really quick, what are one of the most unique ways you are seeing drones being used right now?
Man, a lot of it is just everyday normal stuff for me. But some of the cool things, like if you just look at like golf courses, like we can fly over golf courses and tell where they're watering too much, not watering enough, over fertilizing, under fertilizing, which that sounds cool. But the reality is, for the average golf course, we save them about $200,000 a year in wasted fertilizer. Because what happens is these guys just fertilize everything and they just waste all this fertilizer. We also save them about 12 to 16 million gallons of wasted water a year because they just overwater everything. And then, of course, all that fertilizer, and it goes into pollutants and it goes in the community and all that stuff. So, that's one example of something that's pretty cool. The aerial funerals, that's another thing that blows most people's minds. We probably shouldn't say this publicly, but we'll just say a member. So somebody passed away and their dream was to go to Machu Picchu. And they never got to do that. So the family wanted to do the trip, go up there, and then go ahead and spread their ashes in Machu Picchu. Well, they were like, one, they couldn't afford it to take the family, and they weren't in good physical enough health to go out and do it. So one of our network guys, they hired them, and they went up there and they flew the drone and spread the ashes over Machu Picchu. Now, reason I say you shouldn't say it is legally you're not supposed to be able to fly up there and do that, but they documented the whole thing, and they've got this incredible memory. And now they were able to live stream it, and the whole family could see it and be a part of it. And the feedback they got, it was just one of the most cherished memories that the whole family has, and it really brought the family even closer together. Which is just super cool. And then one other little quick example is like for businesses. So like even as something as simple as real estate, and I want to make 2 points with this. So like real estate, if you talk to anybody that's started to do research in drones, they go, oh, that market is saturated. And they're right. There are more people doing aerial stuff in real estate with drones than any other vertical market. In fact, depending what report you read, it's somewhere between 7 and 9% saturated. So like if you're looking at any other business, you're like 7 or 9% saturated. You mean 90% of it's wide open? That's amazing. But in our space, that's like crazy, crazy saturated because number 2 is less than 0.1%. So there are more people doing that. But the cool thing is what we can do for these realtors is we help them sell their houses faster for more money, and we help them get more listing appointments. So the average listing appointment conversion, according to the National Association of Realtors, is somewhere between 12 and 25%. So that means if they go see 10 potential clients, they're going to get, 1 to 2, maybe 3. When they include aerial imagery and video as part of their package saying, hey, if you list your house with me, you're going to get all this stuff, and show them examples of it, that goes up to 84%. So for putting the same effort forward, now all of a sudden you've gone from getting 1 client to 8 clients, or 1 to 3 clients to getting 8 clients for putting the same effort in. And the real world results we see is like one of our beta guys that started with these 2 realtors. They started doing this, and they were driving Honda Accords. One of them had a Honda Accord, the other had a Toyota Camry. Their business started taking off. So then they upgraded, and they were driving BMWs and Mercedes. And now they're driving around in paid off Rolls Royces and Bentleys. And they pay our drone pilot a $20,000 exclusive retainer to not work with any other realtors within a 2-mile radius of this area that they market and farm. And it's radically changed their lives and his lives and the community and all that stuff. So it's got this massive ripple effect, even in those competitive markets.
Well, competitive markets are always ripe for disruption, and the drone industry is perfect for doing that. So I think this was an amazing introduction, even getting into some details about drones, not just if you're interested in maybe getting into drones as a career, but also if you want to use drones to enhance the career that you already have, like the real estate example you just mentioned. So definitely check out the resources that Damon has provided, and we have that in the description. Check out the social media and check out the Sky Eye Network to see if this might be right for you. Damon Darnell, the drone boss, thank you so much for coming on. This was highly informative, and I will say, though, maybe another time, I would love to hear what it's like to be on the board of NASA, and there's probably like security clearances, some crazy information. Not that you're going to share that, but just how that all goes. So that's a tease for the next time we have you on. Awesome. Damon, again, thank you so much.
Appreciate Thank you guys. It's so great being here.